is up? We are back. It is I, your boy Erick Esteban, and I have to first upfront apologize. I missed last week's upload. I missed last week's episode because of extenuating circumstances, y'all. I could do nothing about it. My laptop that I've been using and has been with me for too long, we'll say it like that, for too long, crashed literally on the session of GarageBand that I was recording last week's episode. So it crashed and nothing was going to happen. But thanks to my dad, shout out to my dad, he hooked me up with a new computer because, as it goes, unemployable artists who are out of work are living check to check. And if not for my father, I would not have been able to purchase a new computer, and I would not be able to record this podcast for you today. So shout out to my dad for hooking me up and hooking up the 1-2 Productions with a brand new laptop computer. And again, I'm going to apologize. I know I promised y'all that I would miss a week, but due to unforeseeable circumstances, my computer crashed and I couldn't record anything. I couldn't even get my email, y'all. I was checking my email on my phone, and that was the only way I could access anything, was because my laptop was basically dead. So again, I'm sorry for that. But that said, guys, if you guys heard the last upload, it was an upload of episode 13 of my other podcast called the Canacuya Podcast, where I host a podcast where we cultivate conversations about cannabis and creativity, and I co-host it with my friend Mitch Narito, who, if you don't know, used to play Donkey Doug on The Good Place and was the first official Filipino-American actor to hold a bong, a cannabis smoking water pipe bong, on national television. We're just going to say it like that. I'm going to acknowledge and give him his flowers for his cannabis royalty status. I'm just going to say it like that. But we went into the history of cannabis. And this cannabis plant that we, or at least me, I know and love. And I've been learning how to grow, and I've been learning how to break down this plant to its literally cellular level. I'm so obsessed and love everything about this, from its medicinal properties to its recreational properties. Everything about this plant I really love. And if you guys didn't hear that in that episode, you can continue to listen to the Canacuya Podcast, and you will continue to show, and it will continue to exhibit my love for this plant and my endorsement of this plant. And with that said, we got some big news this week about my favorite plant, that is cannabis. I know a lot of people in the news are calling it marijuana, and if you listen to my History of Cannabis podcast last week, or 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, because I missed last week, I remember, because my computer crashed. We just covered this. But again, if you listen to the last uploaded podcast, you will have heard the history of cannabis and how I feel as if I'll historically hypothesize that the first Filipino Americans, the Manongs, that were immigrated here to work in the fields in California, were associated with cannabis and its criminalization, and how they used cannabis to demonize cannabis, but also those ethnic groups that were associated with it. There's a quote, and you're gonna hear this quote a lot, because this is my main political issue, and it's also one of those things that it's almost my clarion call. It's my inspiration for putting cannabis and advocacy for cannabis at the forefront of my political podcast, and I also have a podcast that's basically dedicated to it. So, Harry Aslinger basically said, I'll read it for you so that I don't get it wrong, okay? I want to make sure. And I might have read it in that podcast, but I'm reading it again to make a point. because we're talking about 1937, which is when cannabis was first demonized because of this guy, Harry Aslinger, and a guy who owned a paper mill that printed newspapers with paper made from trees, and he didn't want to compete with the hemp and the fiber of hemp because it's a lot easier to make and it's a lot more accessible. But his tree paper mill was where he was trying to make sure it was sustained, and he demonized cannabis to make sure that nobody wanted it anymore. Reefer madness, all that stuff, it all comes from this. But here is the quote that I carry with me and I read every time I don't want to ask the cannabis question. And it is this. By Harry Aslinger, testimony from the U.S. Congress was supporting the Marijuana Tax Act in 1937. 1937. Think about 1937 in the context of 1937, and think about whenever in that time period did you hear Filipinos mentioned specifically. But anyway, I digress. Here we go. Here's the quote. There are 100,000 total marijuana smokers in the U.S., and most are Negroes, Hispanics, Filipinos, and entertainers. This marijuana causes white women to seek sexual relations with Negroes, entertainers, and any others. Scare tactics, fear tactics, and propaganda is what criminalized this plant. And now it brings me to what happened 2 days ago and what the DEA is now proposing to do and scheduling to do, because let's remember, guys, this is not yet done. This is what a proposition that was proposed by the Biden administration, and now the DEA is about to implement its proposal. From moving and rescheduling cannabis from a Schedule 1 plant so that is equivalent and looked at from the federal government like heroin, LSD, cocaine, all these drugs that do not have a medicinal value and cause harm to the society. That's what a Schedule 1 drug is, and that is what marijuana and cannabis, our favorite plant, is currently in, that distinction of Schedule 1 drugs, according to the DEA, the Drug Enforcement Agency, which was created in 1971 by Richard Nixon, and we won't get into the politics of all of that stuff, but let's just be honest, okay? I understand that Biden has his drawbacks, and Biden has a lot of stuff in his history because he's an old dude and he's been in government for a long time, but the alternative is not the way. But we'll get into that, okay? We'll get into that. All right, so they rescheduled cannabis. And if you're a cannabis user, and probably if you're a fan of this podcast and a fan of my comedy, you probably are either a cannabis user or you're not against cannabis users, because you know why. I am a everyday cannabis user. It is my medicine. It makes my brain move right. I keep repeating that phrase because it's really encapsulates my experience with cannabis, because it does truly just make my brain move right. And so I'm very, very interested in its legalization. I want it to be decriminalized. I want it to be taken off the drug enforcement schedule, because at the end of the day, it's a plant, y'all. It is a plant that grows from the ground. I can plant the seed into some soil and I can grow it in the ground. Now, I understand all the mythology and history behind its criminalization. And now I understand that this step of rescheduling it to a Schedule 3 drug, where it has to be regulated by the FDA and distributed by pharmacists, and or however that's going to work, because we'll get into the good things about this and the drawbacks about this. But in as far as how I understand it, if it's a Schedule 3 drug, it is not going to be criminalized. It's going to be decriminalized, but it's still on the schedule of the Drug Enforcement Agency. So it's still going to be under the supervision of the federal government, that being the FDA and or the medical pharmaceutical establishment. which is a little bit precarious for me because obviously I'm not going to fully and I'm a pothead. I don't fully trust the pharmaceutical companies to begin with. But that said, I'm not going to say and argue that there isn't benefit to the fact that the lack of scientific research in this plant, this new classification, this new scheduling will allow for more research, which I think is an incredible thing. Because when you look at and Google the research that's been done in Israel and Google the research that's been done in Canada and all the places where the federal government acknowledges the benefits of this plant, and understand that we've only unlocked the bare minimum of what's possible towards the benefit of this plant. And also understand that as I learn more about the cannabis and the system, there is a endocannabinoid system. And that's what I want y'all, if you are a Filipino and listening to this and you work in the medical field, or if you're not a Filipino and you're interested in this, listen, this is the call to action for me in the middle of the podcast. The cannabis call to action is to Google the endocannabinoid system in your body, because every organism with a spine on this earth has an endocannabinoid system. And that endocannabinoid system regulates every other system in your body. So understand what that means. Because for me, when I understood this, it was mind-blowing to me. And I want y'all to Google this. Google and do your own research, because I've been doing mine and it's still only, again, scratching the surface. But in this endocannabinoid system, it regulates the chemicals in your brain. And this is a very, very, very simplistic explanation of the endocannabinoid system. But it also regulates the circulation of your blood. It regulates the temperament of your gut. It regulates your muscles. There's so many different things that the endocannabinoid system is a part of, because guess what, guys? Our bodies produce their own cannabinoids, and cannabinoids that are similar and chemically similar in structure to the cannabinoids in cannabis plants. So, are we supposed to be in according with our chemical structure in a lot of ways? Some people need this plant because of our biological structure. This is how deep I go in on cannabis. And that's why I am very interested and I want to know everything about what this rescheduling does to affect me. Because at the end of the day, there's a lot of things about this that are basically this rescheduling is a big baby step in a long line of no action and no movement at all. I mean, we're talking about since 1971, the DEA was established, and since 1937, since the 1940s, let's estimate, this drug has been demonized, and this plant has been demonized, and also racialized to demonize the ethnic groups that were associated with it. So, in that, obviously, there are a lot of communities that have been affected by this. When you look at the prison population of our country, it's the largest in the world, and when everything is all said and done, this rescheduling all boils down to money, because this is a power grab by the pharmaceutical companies to get their wedge into the cannabis industry, because they wanted to take control. Because guess what, guys? If the FDA can regulate how and when and what type of cannabis you can have, the pharmaceutical companies are the middleman in that situation. And they can wedge out these smaller cannabis companies, which they've been doing, because some of these multi-state cannabis companies are, subsidiaries of the pharmaceutical companies and of the big tobacco companies and all these other companies that have cut corners and taken a good thing and turned it into a not so good thing. So there's a lot of good, there's a lot of bad. As with everything when you move slowly in a country like ours. Because I always remember a podcast that I use as inspiration for my podcast career, and that is the podcast where Mark Maron on WTF interviewed President Barack Obama. And he said something to the effect of, in a country of 400 million people or 350 million people or however much our population is, it's like moving a big battleship. You can't turn a battleship drastically or change its direction drastically or abruptly. You have to change it very slowly and very gradually. And this descheduling is that very slow, very gradual step that hopefully in the next, once the scientific that is now allowed because of this classification has been done and is allowed and goes forward, and it discovers and unlocks all the different benefits and medical benefits of this plant. And then guess what? Then we can go towards decriminalization and legalization and taking it off any schedule and descheduling. But I think, like my political mentor says, our country moves very slow. I mean, we're still trying to acknowledge some of the stuff, all the ramifications of the Civil War when it boils down to it. See January 6th. Let's just be real, okay? Like, it takes a lot of time for our country to process things. And this cannabis plant has been criminalized for the past almost 100 years. Harry Anslinger mentioned Filipinos and cannabis and entertainers in 1937. It is now 2024. I'm not good at math. I'm not that type of Asian, but I still know that that's close to 100 years. That's like 90 some years, right? I'm not going to do the math. I'm on my point, and I'm not trying to lose my brain by doing some math in my head. I'm just going to be real. Okay. But my point at the end of the day, and what I have said, if you've ever shared a joint with me, if you've ever smoked me, whether in Chicago, California, New York, anywhere where I've done comedy, you will know that I have said this, and I'm going to say it now because I'm actually currently implementing the thing that I said when I was younger. And that is this. It used to be really hard to get weed when I was younger. When I first started smoking weed, I started first smoking weed when I was 19 years old. And in order to get weed, you had to call a dude, and then you'd go to a house, and then you'd go to another house, and you'd have to walk 2 doors down and knock on that door, and then you'd have to do a special knock to walk up 2 flights. You were like Mission Impossible spy just to get, an eighth of weed. And it was hard. It was a difficult process. And then I moved to California. I got my medical license, and it got easier. And I understood. And once I was able to use it all the time, is what allowed me to understand the medicinal benefit for me personally as a medical marijuana patient. It allowed me to understand. It allowed me to dose myself. It allowed me but everything else. It allowed me to align my brain so that I could go to therapy, so that I could focus, because I was diagnosed with ADD when I was a kid in the 80s, when you'd either take Ritalin, which is basically a form of meth, or you grit your teeth and did it, hardcore with no drugs. And that's what I did. My mom didn't want me to go on any drugs, so I didn't do any of those, ADD or behavioral regulators. So I ended up discovering cannabis on my own. And I say all this only because cannabis should be but when you didn't know where you were getting it from, you got what you got. And then as I learned and became basically a connoisseur here in California of all the different strains and cultivars and all the different tastes and terpenes and all the different smells and, aromas and all the different experiences of how to experience this plant, I learned that it's a very simple process to get really good weed if you grow your own. Because nowadays you're dealing with corporations and capitalism. And in a place like California, where it's been recreational since 2019, I think, it's a very different community of cannabis because corporate money is in it. So when it's a corporation, the bottom line is the bottom line is the bottom line. They don't care about the plant. And in some cases, unfortunately, they don't care about the quality of their product. All they care about is their bottom line. And so in order to get to that bottom line and make that bottom line what the investors and, people in charge want, there's corners cut and the waste is made sure to be used. Because there was a story out on Dude Grows that I just saw. Scotty was talking about how they could get moldy weed, clean it, and radiate it with something, and then spray it with different artificial terpenes and restore it to its original state. But it is not the original plant that was dried and grown. It's a little trippy. So it brings me to my point, which is big tobacco and big weed are becoming synonymous. Because let's all remember that tobacco is a plant that we've consumed for hundreds of thousands of years. And it was only up until we started putting chemicals for preservatives and tar and whatever other nasty things that big tobacco put in these cigarettes that turned them into cancer sticks. And maybe, who knows, we'll find out down the line, because now the medical research is available, that nicotine is going to be synonymous with THC and cannabis, and we're all smoking our ways into our death and cannabis. Who knows? But this new rescheduling allows for that research, because we don't know. But at the same time, we do know, because people in Israel have done the research, and as far as like some of the medical research, and as far as what the benefits of this plant are. And so once those benefits are proven here in scientific labs here, I think we can push. And again, this is a baby step. That's kind of how I feel about it. And I hope that it is. But until that day, and even regardless of when that day comes or when that day passes and it's all legal and everybody's smoking in the streets, I myself will now never relinquish my new and fortified connection to this plant. I'm always gonna grow my own. However, which way I can figure that out, whether I rise in finances and this podcast blows up and I'm blowing up and everything's going well, or I'm poor as hell and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to get one harvest and survive to the next harvest because I need weed from one harvest to the next. However it goes, I am going to grow my own, because the connection that I have now established with this plant, but not only this plant, I grow my own strawberries now. I grow my own calamansi. Shout out to all these Filipinos. I grow my own dragon fruit. I grow my own green peppers, chipotle peppers, ghost peppers, serrano peppers, red peppers, all kinds of peppers. I got a pepper patch. Growing cannabis and learning how to grow cannabis has connected me to this earth. And I don't think that I will ever relinquish it, because I have officially become an old Filipino man who loves his garden. I'm your tito who will always give you vegetables when you come to visit my house. That's me. I'm that tito now. That's me. I'm the vegetable tito. I am the plant Jesus. That's what I am. I'm plant Jesus. I'm going to say it right now. I love both. All my fingers are green, not just my thumbs. I love cultivating plants. And so I will never stop growing my own. I will never stop trying to grow my own food. It is just a thing that has connected me to this earth and humbled me and given me patience and so many other therapeutic things, that if this, in any way, this podcast that you've been listening to inspires you in any way, if you are an everyday cannabis smoker, there is no reason or rhyme to not growing your own. You can do it for less than $300. And in fact, if you want to learn how to set up your own grow, you should subscribe to my podcast, my other podcast. You can stay talking to this podcast. I'll do some grow updates and some stuff on here. But at the end of the day, if you want true cannabis content and true cannabis podcast talking all the time about cannabis, you want to subscribe and look for the Canacuya Grow podcast with me and Mitch Narito. And we're going to talk, and we bring a lot of different cannabis guests. We just talked to Muffin B. Puffin, a Filipina photographer from the Stash. I mean, we're trying to build the Filipino-American cannabis community over there. So if you want to be a part of that, follow us over there. And if not, stay over here. And we're going to be here steady doing stuff here at Miscellaneous and Brown. And again, I'm going to remind you that it's me, Erick Esteban. And I'm going to say this. I always say it's your boy, Erick Esteban. But after listening to Kendrick Lamar's Euphoria, I'm not going to call myself my boy anymore, your boy anymore, just because I'm going to be the man now. Just because I want to show y'all that I am not a boy. I acknowledge my father responsibilities, and I am a man. No, but if that's my digression of today, my pop culture prisoner of the moment digression, because if you have not heard it, please listen to Euphoria. Google it. It's on your phone. It is on your phone. Millions of people have already watched it. It's all the internet is talking about. It's ablaze. So I thought I'd give it a slight mention right there. And listen, man, I've been listening to it. It is an opus. It is, for my opinion, and I'm just going to put that out there, and maybe I'm going to put this in the thing to make sure, but for real, Euphoria is the Bohemian Rhapsody of diss tracks. You heard it here. Erick Esteban just said it. Euphoria is the Bohemian Rhapsody of diss tracks. My opinion is it's Euphoria, Ether, and then probably Jay's, the other, I can't remember the name of Jay's, but I'm just saying. Anyway, go listen to Euphoria. Kendrick Lamar, K-Dot, Kung Fu Kenny, the Boogeyman. He's back, y'all. Anyway, okay, I digress. I wanted to kind of, because since the country and internet is divided on who's better, Kendrick or Drake, I wanted to kind of digress to this whole current state of the country and the current state of affairs. Since we just talked about the descheduling and rescheduling and whatever the schedule is on cannabis, I wanted to move to a topic that I told y'all in some of the earlier episodes that I don't want to bring up. And I want to close with it only because if I'm going to acknowledge it here and right now, it's better to do that right here and right now and share with you than beat around the bush. Because I'm going to say it like this. I am only going to bring up the name of Donald J. Trump this one time on this political podcast, because I feel like his name gets enough shine on every other media outlet everywhere. But before I ignore the demon in front of me, I have to first acknowledge my history with said demon. So I'm going to give you guys a little bit of my history and why I am so fucking tired of telling Trump jokes. For real. This dude is so easy to make fun of. It is too easy to make fun of, to the point where I had to make sure that the audience was at my level, because my history of telling Trump jokes goes back now 8 years. My kid, I told the Trump joke, one of the first Trump jokes that I made was about my baby, my youngest child, who was 1.5 at the time of the 2016 election. And I said that I had to stop watching NBC and watching the news so much because my 1.5-year-old child is starting to build a wall of Legos around her and not allowing Pocahontas and and Mulan and all the ethnic Disney princesses behind her Lego wall. I did that, and then I thought I did a joke about how there was an article in Los Angeles where they were talking about removing the Trump star. Ooh, there go a real plane. They were talking about removing the Trump star, and because the people were shitting on the Trump star, and the street cleaners were tired of cleaning up the huge piles of human shit that people were leaving on the Trump star, and they were shitting on the Trump star. And my joke was, I've never really been compelled to shit in public. But 6801 West Hollywood Boulevard, if anyone is listening to this and close to that proximity, I will tell you, if you are politically minded, it feels refreshing, and you've never had a more refreshing shit than a poop when you pooped on the Donald Trump Hollywood star. I'm just going to say it. I've done it multiple times in the past 8 years. Anyhow, I digress again. No, but I want to say that I shared those jokes. Those were some of the first Trump jokes that I wrote, and then I started writing more once he got elected. But I'll tell you that I did the time that I bombed the hardest, and I got to acknowledge this. The time that I bombed the hardest was a week after the election, and I did 8 minutes of solid Trump jokes. And one of them was, I just asked the question. I was like, hey guys, I know that we got to deal with this shit and Trump is elected, but I just want to know, just for my own sake, because I got daughters, how does one grab a pussy? Because I'm not sure how you do that shit. I really don't know do you punch it and then hold it, or you hook it with your fingers? I don't really know what you do. I've never tried to grab a pussy, so I don't really know how to. And I will tell you the tension and the silence that came after that when I told that joke a week after the election, because everyone was still so raw, and everyone was still so sad, and everyone was still really mourning what we had lost. And that was, Trump really stole our decency and our sense of morality, and he really skewed it all up, or actually maybe brought it back to where he thought when America was great again, when people could say racist things and people could say stupid stuff, and he would call a virus the China virus, and he could endanger a whole group of Asian people with the, because obviously, if you're racist, you're not going to make a distinction whether you're Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Filipino, Mongolian, Thai, Vietnamese. Trump says China virus. Well, China's China. You know what I'm saying? I mean, that's what happened, because, every part of our AAPI HN diaspora, was attacked during that time when he would blame China for the coronavirus. So there's a lot of shit where I could never forgive this fool for any of this stuff. But also it's also just it's so tiresome to really think about it, because now you fast forward to now and he's falling asleep in church. Or in church. Like he was in church. He's selling Bibles in church that include the preamble, or the Constitution and the preamble and the Bill of Rights, which, separation of church and state. Fuck that. Put that shit all in one book, I guess. Oh my God. But anyway, he's selling Bibles, okay? And he's selling gold gym shoes. Now, when he went into the sneaker, and then he said, this is going to help me get the blacks. It's going to let me get those African American votes because they like sneakers. As a person of color, I found that very insulting. And also as a sneakerhead, I found that insulting, because those shoes were ugly. Oh my God, those shoes were so goddamn ugly. I have a joke about how Michael Jordan's Air Jordan shoes have always made my manhood feel bigger. Let's just be real. That's just what they do. They make me feel like I have a equivalent manhood to that of Michael Jordan. But those Trump shoes, they're the exact opposite. They do not do anything for your manhood. They make it shrink. It's like cold weather, those Trump shoes. No, but I mean, seriously, are you really serious when you talk about this fool and you talk about this guy who is, I mean, come on. Like, let's just be fully honest and real, okay? When you got a guy that...
who's no longer in favor. Did you ever notice that? No longer in favor. Never fight uphill, me boys. Never fight uphill. They were fighting uphill. He said, wow, that was a big mistake. Never fight uphill, me boys.
I didn't know Trump could do an Irish accent. Did you? Never fight uphill, me boys. Dude, sound like the Lucky Charms, dude. Fight green clovers and blue diamonds. This is your king? I'm killmongering on this shit. For real. This is your king. This is the dude. 91 indictments. I am tired of Trump jokes. I am tired of them. I am tired. And so, now that I have divulged, recorded, and immortalized these on my Miscellaneous and Brown political podcast, I would invite you also to watch those videos that I made 4 years ago, because most of that stuff still applies. And some of you apparently need that reminder that Trump told us to inject bleach. If you go by the standard of, your American presidential elections, how is your life now as to 4 years ago? Let's remember that 4 years ago, guys, we were all fighting over toilet paper and stuck in our houses because of a pandemic that he thought was just going to go away. So let's be reminded where we were 4 years ago and where he brought us to in his 4 years. Horrible. I am hoping that New York does its job and Stormy storms her way and this fool gets convicted of election fraud in New York and we don't have to deal with it because he's going to be in jail. That would be my hope and my dream. But I am a pragmatist and a realist. So what I would like for all you all to do is, I hope you all enjoyed this podcast because you had two podcasts in one. Okay, I made sure to cover two different subjects. I did the main subject for actually three subjects because I explained to y'all first because I own my shit, I own my mistakes, I own my problems. My computer crashed and I missed last week's episode, so I own that, and that was the first part of the episode. But then we had our cannabis section where I showed you and kind of justified and explained the rescheduling of cannabis and kind of justified my cannabis advocacy in a lot of ways again and double down on it because I'm going to keep doubling down on it. Every time I ask a politician and I bring a politician on this podcast, I'm probably going to ask them a question about cannabis and how they feel about it and what their stance is on it because at the end of the day, we're building up our cannabis constituency. So that's how we're doing it here at the Miscellaneous and Brown podcast. But then also, I wanted to make sure and mention that this will probably be one of the last podcasts. It's going to be solo dolo, me, Erick Esteban, by myself, because I'm bringing on my co-host and a co-producer to this show that was my co-producer 4 years ago. Speaking of 4 years ago and Miscellaneous and Brown and all those videos that you can still watch on YouTube at the 1-2 Productions, you can, and at my YouTube channel at Erick Esteban Comedy. But you can go ahead and watch those videos from 4 years ago that were helped and co-produced by my new co-host that I'm bringing on next week, my homie, and one of my new co-writers and co-hosts and co-producers for this show, Chris Mateo, is going to be joining us here at the Miscellaneous and Brown studio. We're going to be doing a StreamYard every week, weekly. Homie was a big part of a lot of the different political campaigns for a lot of different Filipino Americans all across the country, up to and including helping get Joe Biden elected and getting your boy included. Sorry, Kendrick. Getting Erick Esteban included in the Phil Adams for Biden campaign 4 years ago, and now we're about to set this off and do it big for 2024 with Miscellaneous and Brown with me, Erick Esteban, and your new co-host coming next week, Chris Mateo. So with that, if you are listening till right now and you still are listening to me talk about all these different issues that are, burning in my brain and wanting me to get on the mic. So if you're still listening right now, then you really should leave a review on Spotify or on Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to this podcast. Because every time you leave a review, it really helps this podcast get into the algorithm and break that algorithm and help people get. If you think that there are people that should be hearing this voice, then you should probably share this voice with those people, whether it's by writing a review or literally just taking this podcast and be like, yo, homie, you should listen to this, and sending it to your friends and sharing it and spreading the word. Because here we go. We're going to be here every week, every Friday. Erick Esteban, Miscellaneous and Brown. What's up, y'all? Get involved. Register to vote. And spark up. What's up? Let's go.
I don't think you want any problems, but you got one. Here we go. You can see the size is colossal. Look at the way she make the thing go. Make it gyrate, make it shake like tectonic plates. That's what you call an earthquake. Ayy. Make it gyrate, make it shake like tectonic plates. That's what you call an earthquake. Ayy. It's summertime, starting up a heat wave, and now all weekend, hardly slept in 3 days. Whoever's driving the car's the DJ. When it's Q, y'all better pump that bass. The dominance is obvious, I guillotine, heads roll everywhere I go, I rep Philippines. Found my way, turn amaze to amazing. Infinite flows discovered in an ancient spaceship. I see things before they happen, visionary. Bury me inside a studio at the cemetery. My modus operandi not monetary. Noah Lazarus, the holy one out the monastery. So let me see your cue, plus the why, that's the crew. I'm a giant, how I grew, still connected to my roots. Rhymes, I kick it like Bruce, got me feeling like Zeus. Standing tall like Manu, to reach this level need a boost. I don't think you want any problems, but you got one, here we go. You can see the size is colossal. Look at the way she make the thing go. Make it gyrate, make it shake like tectonic plates. That's what you call an earthquake. Ayy. Make it gyrate, make it shake like tectonic plates. That's what you call an earthquake. Ayy. Smoother than Brazilian wax, that's interact. My life a cinematic reflection in the mirror max. With the pros, I'm proliferating. She said my syntax sounds so scintillating. Flavormatics on the beat, savory. Being scared, still doing it, that's bravery. Hunger turn us into savages. Ain't nobody give us nothing, had to do it alone, without a loan. Like Nora from Queens, Aquafina had the shell toe. Adidas used to hang with the drug dealers. Been doing this since cassette tapes in my Walkman, writing rhymes on the subway. Traditions I carry on, hip hop scholar, mastered in the street science. Raw diamonds, I refine them with the stars in alignment. Got the youth to the truth. On the tree of knowledge, squeeze forbidden fruit and made it juice. I don't think you want any problems, but you got one, here we go. You can see the size is colossal. Look at the way she make the thing go. Make it gyrate, make it shake like tectonic plates. That's what you call an earthquake. Ayy. Make it gyrate, make it shake like tectonic plates. That's what you call an earthquake. Ayy. I just wanna dance all night, wanna dance all night, wanna dance all night with you. I just wanna dance all night, wanna dance all night, wanna dance all night with you.